Elisa Bokeen, and we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch.
Welcome back. We are here for another episode of I Went to Therapy. Is This Normal? This is a fun series because I'm sorry.
It is.
Because
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I feel like some of this stuff we like this one I went through, maybe not so much with therapy. Well, with therapy, but just in life, I do this a lot. So I went to therapy, and I think everyone else should go as well. I think everyone else should go. Is that normal? And I'm going to say yes, because I do.
What is normal? I think that's what we're also,
that is,
what we've
yeah.
also mentioned. Like, what is normal? But
Definitely.
Does it happen? Yes, it happens.
Yeah, and it's a lot of reasons, which we'll go through some of them, but definitely, as you make any changes in your life, it's not surprising that you then want people to be on board with you. So I think, so the first one that we're going to kind of talk about is the idea of like, as you start fixing and healing yourself, that you start to pay attention to other people. And it's like, oh, that person needs to be healed and that person needs to be healed. And you start to recognize that everybody needs to be fixed or healed. And so that's a reason why you're like, oh, just go to therapy, just go to therapy, just go to therapy. So you can fix these things that I see in you that needs to be healed. So we tend to feel like everyone, once we've started our healing journey, we see other people and it's like, oh, everybody needs to get fixed. And you truly start to see what other people like. I think it makes you more aware of not only your own stuff, but also as you're dealing with other people, as you're trying to like make these changes in your life, you start to become a little bit more aware of everybody else's stuff. And so then you're like, yes, you need to be fixed, you need to be healed.
Right. Yeah. And can we say that these are y'all's words, not ours? we don't say, we need to be fixed, right? Like we're this is y'all's voice.
We're just speaking for you. We would never.
We're speaking for you. Okay. So that being said, yes, and I think if in the last session I mentioned this a bit when we were talking about I went to therapy and now I want a divorce. Is this part in particular? I believe when we go through this process, we're working on ourselves, we're working on healing, we're doing therapy. It's really easy to feel this bit of superiority, dare I say, like, well, I went to therapy and I did my work. You need to do your work.
I'm
right?
Way
So
up here.
Is there one up? And it happens. I mean, it happens. I've been there, I've been there, and, we're diagnosing everybody.
Grad school was fun. Everybody had a diagnosis after. I was like, oh, you have narcissistic personality traits. I'm not saying you're narcissistic, but these 5.
That's you.
That is you, just in case you didn't know.
Just in case. So part of it is, we have more information, right? So I think that's what you're speaking to is we have more information, we have more insight. We're being educated because a big part of psychotherapy is psychoeducation, that then we kind of feel like we know a little bit more, or we're a little bit wiser than non-therapy seeking folks in our lives.
Yeah, that's true.
It can happen, and I think it's something that will come up, and it's still, I think, indicative of some more work that we need to do.
Definitely. And we're going to go into like what that means later, like what some of these things may mean after we kind of go through why we think everybody should go to therapy. But, I'm an advocate for therapy, so I'm not going to disagree that everybody should be in therapy. But, that's probably why our mind kind of goes right to that, because as we start to like learn and grow, it's like, oh, you have this issue, you need to fix that. And then along with that, we tend to look at how if I'm doing my work and you're in my life, and you're making it difficult, or I have to make these changes because now I have this level of awareness, right? And now I know what a healthy relationship, what a healthy friendship, or whatever the case may be, what that is. Then part of it is like, why don't you just go get your stuff, go get you some therapy, so this could be easier for me, because I don't want to have to be the person that does all of the work in whatever the situation is. And so if everybody else just went to therapy, my life would be so much easier.
Yes.
Which
yep.
could be true, but
yeah. If I didn't have any challenges, life would be easier. But that's not what it is, right? Life has challenges. And this idea that everybody else needs to be fixed and that it will make our life easier, we may not even be aware of it, right? Like we may not even be aware of that. And so I think it really poses another challenge, because that means I'm still taking the focus off of what I need to do. I'm still taking the focus of what changes I may need to make, right? And I think there can even be some resentment that sets in with this. I've seen it happen. Hell, it's happened to me again in my own life. A lot of what we talk about is we've been there. We're not just therapists, we've been clients, and we're first and foremost human. But where it's like, well, sheesh, I'm the one doing all of this work and all of these relationships, and people are just living their life. So there's like this resentment. Again, it's that one up feeling that we might get. But really, this is part of our work. Because now you're going back and now you're being prompted to implement the stuff that you had to work on.
Right.
So maybe you were working on how you manage some of these relationships. And now what this is doing is it's giving you an opportunity to put into play that stuff. But it's kind of like, well, we know the information, that's not enough. It's not for us to have the insight. It's not enough for us to have the education. It's not enough for us to know how to diagnose, our family members. We have to still integrate what we've learned about ourselves, what we've learned about healthy relationships, what we've learned about boundaries into our day-to-day.
Right. And that becomes difficult, and you want it to be easier, and the way for that to be easier is if everybody else does the work, and if everybody else, like if you knew, like, especially because I feel like part of therapy is, like I said, the awareness of yourself, but also the awareness of others. And so sometimes it takes that acceptance and that forgiveness and that like it's okay that you are who you are. But we struggle with that because we don't want it. We want you to change. We want you to be better. We want you to be different, which then goes into the next point. I'm good with these segues today, which is it's difficult for me to see people I care about still suffering. Right. And so
it is.
If I'm doing the work and I feel myself getting better, and I want the people I love and I care about to have the same experience. And so, and it's hard to stay around people that aren't on the same journey at the exact same time as you, because you don't want people around you to suffer.
Right. It's difficult to see the people we love in pain. And it's especially difficult if we've done our work and we're feeling better, right? Like we're feeling better. We're seeing how good it feels to release some of our stuff, to work through trauma. We feel better. We feel more empowered. And so we'll see people that we love and they're still kind of in that state. They're still in that place. And it's difficult because it also forces us to have a different type of relationship with them. I'm thinking about, I've had that happen in my own life, like people that I knew and was really close to way back then, and then they come back into my life now and they haven't necessarily done a lot of work on and not from a judgmental place,
right?
But
they're just the same that they were. And
what it can do is it kind of challenges our identity. right? If this was somebody that you were really close to, and at the time you were
Mm-hmm.
really close to them and you were a lot alike,
Right.
you were a lot alike. And so a lot of your identity back then was wrapped up in the type of relationship y'all had, right? Or they were such a big part of your life. So now it's like, oh, it kind of poses this challenge of reevaluating yourself and your identity, and may even bring up some grief in that we can't have that kind of relationship anymore because I'm not vibing on that level anymore. And it's not like I'm on a higher level. It's I'm on a different station, right? And that can be really difficult. That can bring up a lot of grief. And seeing the people that we love in pain is also difficult and can also bring up a lot of grief, because we also have to realize that they may never change.
Right.
They may never change.
Yeah. And it's hard to accept. It's hard to realize that things for them may not be any different. But I think what we have to think about is like, is that okay, right, for them?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's we are always very concerned with what we consider better to be, and very concerned with how to get other people to our space of what we think better is. But is that even for them, or is that for you? Are you of course you want people around you to be better and to not be suffering. And sorry. It's a lot. It's people outside mowing the lawn. It's a lot. But yeah, so I think a big part of that is, one, I believe that sometimes we don't want to see people suffering, but it's because we don't want to see it. So it's more about our own comfort than their comfort. And two, I think sometimes when we're so focused on fixing other people, we actually stifle their ability to fix themselves. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
The last one. Go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say no, but that's such a big part of it. In that applies to so many different areas, where a lot of the times it really speaks to. I'm thinking of Dr. Brene Brown's work, in that seeing you suffer and seeing you in your pain, I have to be in a really vulnerable place to be able to be around that, right? Because seeing you in pain causes me to be in pain, causes me discomfort. I don't want to feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
Change that so that I don't have to be in pain about it anymore, or I don't have to worry about you anymore, or I don't have to have anxiety about it, whatever it may be. But again, yes, we have compassion and we have empathy. We don't want to see people suffer.
Right.
And sometimes there's some codependency stuff working there also, where in order for me to be okay, I need you to be okay.
Right. I feel like we went into we'll talk about it more, but we've already went into all this stuff.
We did touch on
what it was. Yeah. The last one is, when you find something that you really enjoy, that you love, that you feel is working for you, you want other people to experience it. And this is the one that I know I identify with. As soon as I learn anything new, I'm like, you have to do this. It's so amazing. So that could be anything from like a diet to the new therapy practice that I'm starting to, or theory that I'm learning. It's all kind of stuff. But anytime you find something that you truly enjoy, it could be a coupon on, Amazon or something. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But you're like, you want to tell everybody, you want people around you to benefit. You want everybody to experience this thing that you are now experiencing. And that's great. And it's wonderful. And you want to share it. And there's nothing wrong with it. Just be mindful that again, you can share it and you can talk about it all day, but when people aren't ready to take that step, that's okay too.
Yeah, that they don't need it. And this happens a lot with me and you, where I'm like, look at this software, look at this app, I love it, it's only $3.99 a month, and you're like, I don't need it. Well, I know you don't need it, but it's a lot of fun, and come on. You're like, I'm good. Fine.
Thanks. I'm glad it changed your life, but I am okay. Yeah, so I think it's definitely normal to want to share things that you really enjoy, and want to have people that you can kind of like go on this path with and all that kind of stuff. But then that goes into what you said. Is this more about codependency, or is this truly, and it could be that you truly just want them to experience this, but at the point where you start to question, because I've had that happen before where like, I'm like, no, you should do this. This will change your life. And the person's like, but I don't want to. You're just determined to be miserable. You don't want to be happy. And it's like, or this isn't their journey. This is your journey. And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
So recognizing is that you trying to fix them so that you do feel better, or fix them because you want to, like I said, have somebody that's doing it with you so you don't feel so alone in the journey that you may be on.
Mm-hmm. So I think that takes us to the segue of, and you're right, we have touched on these, but so what do you do? What do you do? You've gone to therapy, you have seen the light, right? You've seen the light. Life is so much better now that you have a dope therapist, and you want everybody in your life to also have a dope therapist. We get it. We're biased. We're therapists
we are
and clients, and we know that therapy is dope. And so what do I do with this now? If I'm learning, okay, I'm noticing this about myself. I'm noticing that I think everybody needs to get fixed. I'm noticing that, you know, I don't want to work as hard and it'd be much easier, et cetera, et cetera. So one, I think that if you're in this space with any of these, which you will be, and you will be probably at different points in your life, is that's really a good indicator that you still got some work to do. And there's always going to be work to do. So let me just say that there's always work to do. We're humans, we're evolving. So the first thing I would say, speaking to piggybacking off of what your last comment was, is learning to honor where people are in their journey. And like you said, you may be in a different place. You may have a different journey, and learning how to honor theirs and be at peace with yours.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's such a big part. You made a point earlier of how often we really highlight the importance of having compassion for ourselves, of giving ourselves grace, giving ourselves space to move through the journey at whatever pace, but we're not always as eager to extend that to somebody else.
Because we want them to be doing it at the same pace that we're already doing it, right? Like I can be accommodating to you as long as you're where I'm at, right? As long as you are moving at the same, and that's, in life in general, that happens a lot. But I think especially when we're talking about therapy, mental health, or whatever they're struggling with, it's kind of like, well, why you should get there quicker. I think a lot, of course, relationship therapy. So I think a lot about my couples, right? Like, it's kind of like, well, move faster. Like, why aren't you there yet? And it's like, so this thing that may have been innate to you, it's taken them some time to get to. Or maybe you caught the concept a lot quicker than they did. Is there something wrong with that? Like, as long as they're trying and they're putting in the effort. So yeah, so understanding that even therapy is a part of this journey through life. And so maybe for you, maybe their part is, I'm going to read all these books and start journaling and really get in touch with myself. Maybe their part may be a spirituality piece, or, you know, something like that. Like, it doesn't have to look the same. And I think so often we get caught up in like, well, if this worked for me, I know it will work for you, and not allowing people to figure it out for themselves. And that doesn't mean you can't share it. Like, yes, definitely talk about it. Share what's worked for you. Share what you like about it. But don't try to force other people to come on the same journey that you're on.
Right. And I think to add to that, honoring that sometimes for some people, they don't have an interest in being in a different space.
Yep.
Like, they are good. They're genuinely like, no, I'm not going to change. This is how it's going to be. I'm okay with it. Right. And I think that sometimes is the most difficult to really accept and be at, because again, it forces us to make certain decisions about boundaries, about what role we're going to play in the relationship, about the relationship, really, which kind of takes us into the next part. Is what we have to do is we have to work on boundary setting, right? We have to work on boundary setting, because if I'm honoring where you're at, and where you're at is where I used to be, but I'm not anymore, and so I can't engage with you like that, then I have to really look at my boundaries and your boundaries. Because I think that's it. Respect both, because I think when we talk about boundaries, you know, respect my boundaries. right? Respect my boundaries and honor my boundaries. But we also have to do that for others.
Yeah.
And their boundaries may also be, hey, my boundary is I don't want to change, and I don't want you to tell me all the time to change, because I'm not going to go to therapy. I then have to honor, if I'm going to be honoring boundaries, I have to honor that as well. So, so we have to maybe do some more work around boundaries and how we set them and how we identify them and how we enforce them.
Right. And with boundaries, recognizing, are your behaviors more codependent? Do you have work to do around being very dependent on how people around you live, how people around you thrive, how people around you are happy or not happy? Does that impact you where you take it on as your responsibility? Because if you're struggling with respecting people's boundaries, if you're struggling with respecting your own boundaries, there may be some level of codependency there. And so I think that's another area. I think sometimes we're in therapy and it's like, I haven't figured out, and that's it. And then as you start to recognize how this impacts your world around you, there's sometimes more work to be done. And so it may be, why am I so caught up in how these other people find their peace or find their way through life? And if it doesn't fit what I think it should be, why am I struggling with that?
Yes. And to that, because I think a lot of times we will hear that term codependency, and how do we know in the moment if we are struggling with some codependency? And I think the question usually is in the moment to ask yourself, in order for me to be okay, do I need you to be okay? Right? Like, so is that it? So I can't be okay unless you're okay. I can't be happy unless you're happy. And how many times have we maybe fallen into that in our lives? Right? I think we've all touched on that on some level, and some of us struggle with it a bit more than others. But this idea that I can't be at peace, I can't be happy, I can't be healthy unless my mother or my children or my friend or my partner is also okay.
Right.
Then we're running into that space of codependency, which can be really, really difficult when it's people that we love. Because then it's like, but I love them. How can I be okay if they're not okay? So one thing I will say is, if you're hearing all of this and you're like, damn, I still got a lot of work to do. I thought I had figured it out, or you have. This does not undo or discredit the work you've done. It's just the next kind of layer that we have to look at.
And I like that you said that, because I feel like that's a big part when we're talking about your mental health and navigating that piece. The first part is typically the identification of what we're struggling with, right? And maybe you're in crisis, maybe you're not, but there are certain things that you want to kind of get a handle on, get an understanding of, and all of that. Then what typically happens is you start looking around you, like we said, and looking at other people that need help. But what it boils down to is, once you have that clarity, once you see people as they are, the higher level of mental health, I guess, or self-awareness, or whatever you want to call it, is the acceptance of people as they are. And we struggle with that a lot, because we still want, like we talked about earlier, you want the best for people and you want them. But the reality is, you have to learn to accept people exactly where they are. And what's scary about that is then you have to make decisions on how you're going to move in that space. Right. Yeah. And so if, to Elisa's point earlier, if the person is not ready, or they're comfortable, or they're not interested in having different, right? Maybe whatever struggles they're having helps them make it through the day. Maybe whatever struggles they're having is why they're so amazing at their job, or that contributes to that, and they don't see any other way. So once you kind of have that clarity of like, okay, everybody has it. I have issues. Other people have issues. I can't fix other people's issues. The hard part is like, now what do I do in these relationships? And it doesn't mean, because I know we talk about boundaries, a lot of times people think, okay, so I have to cut these people off. It doesn't always mean that. But you do have to make a decision. And I say that if they're not doing you harm, right? Because there's a difference if there's some if the crossing of the boundaries is actually harming you, making you feel bad, whatever the case may be, take care of yourself. But if their choices in life aren't actually doing you harm, then you just have to setting a boundary doesn't mean ending a relationship. Setting a boundary means we now have to shift how we interact with each other. We now have to shift how we are in relation with each other. And so that might mean that I can't support you in this particular area of your life like I used to. Like if you're in a bad relationship, it might be like, hey, like I just can't keep being that person for you to talk to. We can talk about everything else and we can enjoy each other, but this may be a little bit of a limit for me because I don't have the capacity to do that for you. And it's unfortunate because some people will take it okay and some people won't, but it's not about you completely having to cut off relationships just because they aren't on the same journey or aren't willing to do what you think they should do. The higher level of involvement, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you know what I'm saying, is more of like accepting they are about to be right here, this whatever they're doing, is more of the acceptance of who people are and the acceptance of where they are, and not judging them for that, and just adjusting yourself how you need to. Okay, I'm gonna mute me while I'm not talking.
Right, and I think to that is, I like what you said. I like what you said in that boundaries does not automatically mean cut off. And if you can think of boundaries as what's okay, what's not okay, right? And boundaries are really intended to protect and preserve your well-being and to protect and preserve the other person's well-being. And then you think about the relationships boundaries. And so how do we protect and preserve our relationship and our connection? And what I would say to that is, if you can think of it in those terms, so this is a person that is going to remain in my life, like, because we can't cut everybody off, right? It took me a long time to learn that. I was one of those people that was like, I'm done, like I'm out. So through therapy and self-work and exploration, I realized that that's not always the answer. So, but if you think of it as boundaries, in that, how do we stay connected and preserve the relationship? So what that may look like, for example, let's say it's a family member that you really struggle with. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your father. And so you begin to say and operate in a way where it's like, okay, once you start doing this, it's not okay. Mm-hmm. So I am going to either leave at that moment. The conversation is going to be over in this moment. I won't engage with you in this way because I want to preserve the connection.
Right.
Because I want to preserve my well-being, because I don't want to go off on you, and mm-hmm. because I want to preserve our connection. That's why I'm going to implement these limits with love, because I do want you in my life.
Right. And along with that, when we're talking about boundaries and we're talking about just the acceptance of who people are, then you also have to recognize that there's a period of grief for that as well. Because there are certain things that we expected in these relationships that we desired, especially if we're like, if they would just work on this piece, mm-hmm. then we could be all of this. And so you have to grieve what you thought that relationship would be, what you thought that friendship would be, what you thought that parent-child, like you have to sometimes work on, how do I let go of my beliefs that we could have been better and accept the reality of what it is. And you have to do that through the grieving process sometimes.
Yeah. I think that is a big part of it. Especially when you're going through therapy, I think grief can come up a lot as mm-hmm. you start to really have clarity and identify some of the experiences that you've gone through. There is a lot of grief for what you've been through. And then there's grief about when you have more clarity about, so this person's not going to change, or this is how it is. We have to let go of this hope.
Yeah.
At that point, it's like letting go of this hope that things would be different, and they're not. And so that's a loss. That is a loss. Or I can't engage in this relationship with you anymore in this way. That's a loss. So just keeping that in mind, that if those heavier emotions kick in too, that's pretty expected.
And you don't have to cut yourself off from feeling it as well. Because I'm thinking about how, let's say it was a relationship where you did have to say, like, look, I can't even navigate this anymore because you won't respect my boundaries, or whatever the case may be. It's okay to recognize that there is somebody that may not be good in your life and still grieve it. Like, and still, because there was a reason they were there. Right. So there are parts of that relationship that you will miss. There are parts of that relationship that you wish you can keep. And sometimes I think we get so into this, like we don't care and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to being like, no, this does suck. Like, I wish our relationship could have been different. I wish we could have, but I also have to make sure I'm taking care of myself first. And so it's okay. Like, allow yourself to have that grief and that sadness about a relationship ending. That's perfectly fine. So, yeah.
Well,
right.
there you have it. Yep. There you have it. So we hope that you're enjoying this series. If you have more questions too about, is this normal? And we're using normal in quotes. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what your thought is on this series as well.
Yes. So make sure you subscribe across all podcasting platforms. So iTunes, Google Play, which is turning into Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Things are happening. YouTube, leave a comment on YouTube. If you have other questions or other things that come up when you go to therapy and it's like, is this normal that this is happening? Leave a comment on YouTube and we'll reply and probably make an episode about it. So thank you for joining us. Follow us across social media, Melanin and Mental Health, Melanin Health on Twitter, and head over to melaninandmentalhealth.com to find a therapist, to check out our merchandise. I'm going to try to remember to put our shirts in the description box, because I never do that. Yes. And to listen to all podcasts. So we appreciate you and we thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.